I saw death, saw it with my own eyes, and now the only thing I can do is remember. Platoon wasn't just another Vietnam War film. It was a brutal exorcism of memory drawn from the lived experiences of its director, Oliver Stone. What audiences didn't realize is that behind the mud, blood, and screams on screen, chaos was unfolding off camera too. Actors breaking down, stunts going wrong, and real jungle conditions breaking men apart. Today, we're pulling back the curtain with 15 weird facts about Platoon, from a boot camp that felt more like torture to the shocking onset injuries no one talks about. And stick around, because the bonus fact might just change the way you see the film forever. Let's dive in. Oliver Stone made actors live like soldiers. Before cameras rolled, Oliver Stone sent his cast into a real military boot camp deep in the Philippines jungle. For 2 weeks, actors like Charlie Sheen, Willem Dafoe, and Tom Berenger were stripped of Hollywood comforts. They slept in foxholes, carried heavy packs, ate bland rations, and endured constant harassment from military advisors. Stone wanted them broken down, just like real draftees were in Vietnam. It wasn't method acting. It was survival training. By the time filming began, the men weren't just acting like soldiers, they felt like them. This immersion created the raw authenticity you see in every grimy detail, from the way they hold their rifles to the 1,000-yard stares in their eyes. For some actors, the psychological toll never fully left. It wasn't play acting, it was war by proxy. The jungle was as dangerous as the enemy. The film was shot in the steamy jungles of the Philippines, where the oppressive heat and swarms of insects became as punishing as any scripted battle. Actors collapsed from dehydration. Leeches clung to their skin. Some got jungle rot on their feet from days in damp boots. At one point, a typhoon nearly derailed production, flooding parts of the set and scattering equipment. The physical misery bled into their performances. When you see the exhaustion etched into their faces on screen, that wasn't acting. The environment was actively breaking them down, just as the Vietnam landscape broke countless soldiers. What audiences didn't know is that every bead of sweat, every trembling muscle was terrifyingly real. The cast was divided into real squads. Stone didn't want camaraderie faked. He divided the actors into 2 squads, mirroring the rival factions in the film, one led by Elias and the other by Barnes. Each squad trained, ate, and slept separately during boot camp. The men weren't even allowed to speak to members of the opposing side. This deliberate division built real-life rivalries. When the cameras rolled, the tension between Elias's idealistic followers and Barnes's hardened killers wasn't just scripted, it was personal. The actors carried resentment, suspicion, and even jealousy into scenes. What emerged was one of the most authentic depictions of fractured military brotherhood ever filmed. Not actors at war, but squads with something real to lose. Tom Berenger's scars terrified the cast. Tom Berenger's chilling transformation into Sergeant Barnes required hours in the makeup chair. Artists crafted jagged, disfiguring scars across his face, giving him a sinister, battle-hardened aura. But it wasn't just prosthetics, it was psychology. Berenger stayed in character between takes, often glaring silently at his fellow castmates, his scarred visage catching the light like a ghost in the dark. Charlie Sheen later admitted the scars unsettled him so much he found it hard to relax off set. The makeup blurred the line between man and monster. For the younger actors, Berenger became a walking nightmare, embodying the corrupting power of war in a way that chilled even behind the scenes. The scars didn't just shape Barnes, they haunted the cast for months after filming. Willem Dafoe nearly drowned filming his iconic death. The most unforgettable image in Platoon is Willem Dafoe's Sergeant Elias running, arms outstretched as he's gunned down in slow motion. But what audiences didn't see is the danger behind that scene. To film Elias's escape through the jungle, Dafoe had to sprint into marshy terrain filled with hidden sinkholes. During one take, Dafoe stumbled into a patch of quicksand-like mud and began sinking rapidly. Crew members rushed in, pulling him free just in time. Stone, obsessed with realism, insisted the sequence continue with minimal interruption. Dafoe's frantic struggle in the scene isn't just performance, it's partly his fight against drowning. That haunting death became cinematic legend, but it was nearly a real one. Charlie Sheen wasn't the first choice. Charlie Sheen might be the face of Platoon today, but he was far from Oliver Stone's original pick. Stone initially wanted his first choice, Jim Morrison of The Doors, back in the early 1970s when he first wrote the script. After Morrison's death, the project stalled for over a decade. Later, Emilio Estevez, Sheen's brother, was considered for the role of Chris Taylor. When Sheen finally got the part, he was just 19 and relatively unknown. The role catapulted him into stardom, but Stone intentionally cast him as an outsider. Surrounded by seasoned actors like Dafoe and Berenger, Sheen's raw inexperience mirrored his character's wide-eyed descent into the brutality of war. It wasn't neat casting. It was Stone using vulnerability as a weapon, forcing Sheen to grow up on screen under fire. Real soldiers trained the cast. To strip away Hollywood polish, Stone brought in Captain Dale Dye, a Vietnam veteran, as the film's military advisor. Dye didn't go easy on the actors. He forced them into grueling night patrols, ambush drills, and endless marches in full gear. Sleep was a luxury. Comfort was non-existent. Stone gave Dye free rein to make them suffer, and he did exactly that. The actors hated him at first, but the respect they eventually developed mirrored the soldier-commander dynamic perfectly. By the time cameras rolled, the men instinctively looked to Dye for leadership, even when he wasn't in a scene. His fingerprints are on every salute, every formation, every whispered call of incoming. Without Dye, Platoon wouldn't feel like lived war. It would feel like theater. The set was plagued by illness. Shooting in the Philippine jungle wasn't just physically draining, it was medically dangerous. The cast and crew battled dysentery, malaria scares, and food poisoning from questionable local supplies. John C. McGinley recalled losing so much weight from sickness that his wardrobe team had to constantly adjust his fatigues. The worst part? There was no real relief. Even after long days of filming, actors went back to camp only to deal with mosquitoes, damp bedding, and rationed meals. Stone refused to pamper them with air-conditioned trailers or gourmet catering. He believed the suffering would bleed onto the screen. And it did. The sickly, hollowed faces you see in the final act weren't created by makeup. They were the visible toll of a cast and crew at war with the jungle itself. Johnny Depp made his breakout in silence. Long before 21 Jump Street made him a household name, Johnny Depp appeared in Platoon as the young interpreter learner. But most audiences barely noticed him. His role was pared down significantly in the editing room, leaving Depp with little dialogue and scattered appearances. What's fascinating is that Depp spent most of the shoot absorbing the atmosphere, watching veterans like Dafoe and Berenger work. It became an informal acting school. Though largely silent in Platoon, Depp later credited the grueling shoot with giving him discipline and perspective that shaped his career. In many ways, Platoon is the hidden foundation of Depp's future stardom. He wasn't yet a star, but he was sharpening the tools he'd use to become one. The famous night ambush nearly broke the cast. One of the most harrowing scenes is the night ambush sequence where the platoon suffers heavy casualties under fire. The production recreated this with live pyrotechnics, endless smoke, and practical explosions detonating just feet away from actors. The cast spent night after night crouched in mud, firing blanks as real dirt and debris rained down. Sleep deprivation made it worse. Some actors hadn't rested properly in days. When the cameras captured their trembling hands and frantic shouting, it wasn't scripted panic. It was exhaustion and real disorientation. Oliver Stone pushed them to the edge of breaking, and it shows. And before we move on, go ahead and like and subscribe, because just like the men in Platoon, we're only halfway through the battle, and the darkest secrets are still to come. Oliver Stone made a cameo in the trenches. Most directors stay behind the camera. Not Oliver Stone. As a Vietnam veteran himself, he refused to simply orchestrate the war. He stepped back into it. Stone appears briefly in Platoon as a soldier in Chris Taylor's unit, usually blurred in the chaos of firefights. But his presence wasn't about vanity. Stone wanted to physically feel the mud, smoke, and tension alongside his cast. Crew members said he sometimes shouted instructions mid-scene, still in character, urging actors to stay low or move faster. For the young performers, it was a constant reminder that their director wasn't just imagining the war, he'd lived it. His cameo is easy to miss, but the weight it carried on set was immense. The film crew risked friendly fire. The realism of Platoon came at a price. The jungle firefights weren't filmed with CGI or distant special effects. They used live pyrotechnics and tightly timed charges. Crew members, crouched just out of frame, controlled explosions with second-to-second precision. One mistimed blast could have buried an actor under real debris. On several occasions, shrapnel from exploding squibs struck too close for comfort. Willem Dafoe once admitted he feared losing an eye during a chaotic take, yet Stone kept pushing. Bigger blasts, closer detonations, more chaos. The line between movie set and battlefield blurred dangerously. For the cast, every gunfight carried a trace of real danger. Charlie Sheen was haunted by his father's shadow. For Charlie Sheen, starring in Platoon wasn't just a career break, it was an echo of family history. His father, Martin Sheen, had delivered a legendary war performance in Apocalypse Now just years earlier. Charlie confessed he feared comparisons, dreading headlines that labeled him the lesser Sheen. The pressure grew heavier under Oliver Stone's unforgiving direction. Stone didn't coddle Charlie. He treated him like a recruit who had to prove himself daily. For Sheen, the jungle became a crucible, not just of survival, but of identity. What audiences saw on screen, the hesitation, the fear, the gradual hardening, wasn't only Chris Taylor's journey. It was Charlie Sheen wrestling with his father's cinematic ghost. The final battle was a production nightmare. The climactic firefight, where the platoon is nearly wiped out, required massive practical effects. Exploding bunkers, burning foliage, and hundreds of extras swarming the set. To create the sense of apocalyptic chaos, Stone insisted on shooting during actual pre-dawn hours, which meant rushing against the clock before daylight broke. Rainstorms repeatedly ruined carefully staged pyrotechnics, causing costly delays. Equipment shorted out in the mud. Some extras panicked when explosions went off closer than rehearsed, scattering in the wrong directions. But the disarray worked in Stone's favor. The final battle looks like hell on earth because, behind the scenes, it nearly was. Controlled chaos became uncontrolled, and the camera captured it all. The film nearly didn't get released. Today, Platoon is hailed as a classic. But in 1986, studios didn't want to touch it. War films were considered box office poison after several flops, and Stone was still regarded as a risky, abrasive filmmaker. Orion Pictures finally gambled on the film, but even then, executives doubted audiences would stomach its brutality. When it premiered, those doubts evaporated. The film not only raked in box office gold, but also swept the Academy Awards, winning Best Picture and Best Director. Ironically, the movie no one wanted became the definitive Vietnam War story. What executives didn't know was that Stone wasn't making a war film, he was exorcising his demons, and the world was ready to watch. The script was written in blood and memory. Oliver Stone began writing Platoon right after returning from Vietnam in 1968. He drafted it while grappling with PTSD, pouring his nightmares and memories directly onto the page. For years, no studio would buy it. Hollywood wasn't ready to face a war so raw, so unvarnished. When it finally got made, nearly 20 years later, the words weren't just dialogue. They were fragments of Stone's real past. Men he knew, deaths he witnessed, guilt he carried. Every scream, every betrayal, every bullet is anchored in something he lived through. Platoon isn't simply a war movie, it's a confession, disguised as cinema. Platoon wasn't about heroes or victories, it was about survival, trauma, and the impossible choices men made in a war that tore souls apart. Behind the camera, the cast and crew lived through their own battlefield of exhaustion, illness, and danger, so that the film would burn with truth. If you found these secrets eye-opening, like, subscribe, and share, because history doesn't just live in books. Sometimes it bleeds onto film, and Platoon will forever stand as cinema's most haunting reminder of a war that refused to be forgotten.